Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. It is 33 days to the general elections in Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation. Now, Nigerians, quick question. Have you gotten your PVC? Because starting today on Breakfast Central, we'll bring you up to speed with all the happenings in the lead up to D-Day. Who is a voter? And of course, quick question also, how powerful is your PVC? What should you know about protecting your vote? And should your vote be sold for any amount? There is a specific amount, 10,000 naira, 5,000 naira, 2,000 naira, maybe? And also big question, who is your preferred candidate? This is Election Countdown at Nigeria, and I am Osalgie Ogbonwa. Welcome back. This is Election Countdown Nigeria, an all-new segment on Breakfast Central, which is focused on the national presidential elections. After campaigns began in earnest last year, Nigerians are looking forward to deciding who becomes the next president come February 25th, 2022. And as the countdown heats up with national campaigns across the country, one thing is certain, like every other election, the candidates need your vote. There is a call for a party or electoral alliance, as if, of course, the campaigns aren't enough. What exactly do we even say, or do we even describe as an electoral alliance? Now, let's see if we can quickly break that down for you this morning. An electoral alliance is one thing that, of course, a few Nigerians are used to. If you remember, in 2014, when it built up to the last the elections in Nigeria that brought in this current administration, there were some political alliances along with the switching and moving from one party to another. You know, they call it porting by Nigerian politicians. One of those things did happen. An electoral alliance is also known as bipartisan electoral agreement, electoral pact, or electoral agreement. The association of individuals with their, of course, choices, which, of course, they put these choices together temporarily and decide to put aside differences in favor of common goals and ideology. Also, the association of political parties to pool their voter support and get elected, or stop another party or another candidate from getting elected. You must have heard a lot of that, in the last few months. The partners in an electoral alliance usually do not field candidates against one another, but instead they encourage their supporters to vote for the candidates from the other members of the alliance. It's also a cluster of groups or smaller parties with their own traits standing together under a single leader with a single prospectus. It is usually formed just before the elections and not after. It's a very interesting thing to see. And remember also, like I said, in the past, in the build-up to the 2014 elections, which is the most recent, there's been other times that it has happened, but in the 2014-2015 elections, there were alliances that did happen. And now there's more and more of those conversations happening with smaller parties across Nigeria. Now that you know what it means, now let's tell you that the People's Democratic Party has confirmed that they're in talks with 11 other parties who have approached the party for a working alliance. You would recall similar talks took place between the ruling All Progressives Congress and other smaller parties in the past. PDP's Deputy National Publicity Secretary Ibrahim Abdullahi said the party commenced talks with close to a dozen parties and is looking to welcome more groups on board. He said, in quote, "There are a good number of them, but it will not be wise to publicly list them. At the last time I checked, we were in talks with over 11 of them." Now, talking about 11 parties, how many parties really are vying for the presidential seat in Nigeria? Now, let's share that with you. You can also check out the INEC website and share with you, of course, to find out how many of these parties are contesting. There's many of them, some of them, with strong political candidates. How many of them can you mention aside the PDP, the APC, Labour Party, and of course the NNPP, which, seemingly the four most popular ones at this time. We, of course, will share some of them with you. There's also the ADC. There is other smaller parties across Nigeria, and that's why you can find 11 of them that may not have national spread, deciding that they would rather, join tents or join hands with some of the big parties support them, pull their supporters, along with them, and see if they can, get victory for them. Now, join us to dig deeper into why some political parties may be seeking election alliance is a political analyst and communications strategist, is managing editor of Avalon Daily, Ayo Adio. Thanks for joining us, and good morning to you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Now let's talk about it. Political alliances, they're not strange. Like I said, it's happened most recently in 2014, in the build up to the elections that brought the current administration into power. But let's talk about, it in 2023. Was there an expectation that there would be something like this? And would you have expected it from a different, political party entirely?
There are political alliances in every general election, whether it's presidential, whether it's state governorship elections, whether it's local government elections. There are always alliances by political parties to win their respective elections, whether it's at the state or at the federal level. It's the beauty, it's the little sauce that makes democracy beautiful. So it's nothing strange. It's happened in every single election cycle, and this is absolutely no different. And you'd expect to see a lot more alliances as time continues to unfold, as we get closer to the elections. And these alliances happen primarily for two reasons. One is the perception of it. When political parties have, for instance, 10 other political parties endorse them, it signals or suggests to the populace that this political party might just be the party to follow. It might not mean that they have the numbers to actually pull the political party over the line, but it's the perception that it creates, that if 10, 11 other political parties can, forgo their own ambition and toe behind this political party, then that party has to be doing something right. The second, of course, is that some political parties have influences across some battle states, across some battlegrounds and across some local governments where that other party needs to go across the line. So you have in cases like in Osun elections, for instance, the one before this, yeah. You realize that the elections was won with less than 1,000 votes, yes. And it came down to Ife, where a certain Omishori held sway in that particular local government. And you had the two major political parties jostling to win his favor. And it was obvious that the party that he went with was going to win the elections. But before then, he couldn't win the election on his own. But when he came down to the wire, he had influence in the Ife local government. And he helped the APC win that election. So political parties do that to go on alliances with certain political parties that may look small nationally, but seem to have certain influences in some local governments, in some key battleground states that they want to win. Now,
in the 2023 elections, the PDP has stated that there's about 11 political parties. They haven't been named, so we may not know who they are. So let's talk about that, and if this would give the PDP any sense of, victory or, increase their chances, moving into the elections. And also, there was an alliance that was expected. It didn't eventually work. It was the Labour Party and the NNPP alliance initially, and that didn't eventually work. And if you followed, of course, the last debate, you heard the NNPP candidate make some statements that seem, a little bitter. So let's talk about those two things. Will the PDP and its 11 mystery parties be able to give them a chance of victory? And of course, what happened to the NNPP and the LPA alliance? Would that maybe have been able?
So first, let's talk about the PDP and its alliances. If you look at the national demography and the pathway to victory, as they call it for the PDP, the chance that Atiku Abubakar has to be president is to be competitive in every single state of the federation. He doesn't need to win every state. All he needs to be is to be competitive. Yes. To come second in the states that he loses and comes first in the states that he can actually win. Now, to do that in some battleground states, he will need the alliances of some smaller political parties to be able to pull him over the line. But in that sense, there are only few political parties that have that ground game in certain states that can pull him over. And I'm talking about parties like the NNPP in certain states. You've seen that in Bauchi, for instance, some members of the NNPP have collapsed their structures for the PDP in that particular state. And we're talking of smaller other political parties like the SDP in some certain states in the Southwest. Now, these are just a few political parties who have some ground game in some states, or perhaps like the Youth Party, who have a number of youth votes across the country. Now, if he's able to do that in those battleground states, and those numbers are able to push him to come second in states that he cannot win, then he stands quite a decent chance. But for the NNPP and the Labour Party, I think it was a clash of egos. and the people who managed the talks between both parties, with profound respect, didn't manage the discussions very well.
I'm going to put on hold there. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we of course will continue with this conversation. It is Election Countdown Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to Election Countdown Nigeria, and this morning we're talking political alliances. This morning with Ayo Adio. We, of course, we're having a discussion about the Labour Party and NPP. The possibility of that alliance a few months ago that eventually was thrown away. So let's get you go on with that.
Yes, and I was making the point that it was a clash of egos that made it impossible for that merger or that alliance to happen. A famous political strategist once said that you can make anything happen in politics if you're not willing to take the credit. And he's talking about egos there. And I think it was egos that put a clog in the wheel of that alliance that would have been something of a
but would they even have been beneficial to anybody?
That alliance?
To either of them, yes.
I think that alliance could have pushed the presidential election to a point where a third party would have won that elections. Because clearly, if that alliance had happened, it means that Peter Obi would have been extremely competitive in the Northwest. And he would have picked significant votes in the northeastern part of the country. And if he does well, as he's predicted to do in the polls in the southeastern part of the country, and pick pockets of votes in the north-central part of the country, there's a chance that it's either he wins that election or he pushes or forces that election to a runoff. So it would have been a beauty of an alliance, and it would have been a proper three-horse race if that alliance had happened. And there was, there's no gainsaying that there was a chance that he could have won if those two candidates ran, together. But egos got in the way, and that alliance could not happen. And I think because it happened late in the day, the APC that you talked about in 2014, it took almost a year of talks and negotiations for that to happen. But I guess that because it wanted to happen in a few weeks, and too many egos were on the line, and that couldn't happen. So,
Labour Party wasn't a major part of the conversation, until barely a couple of months ago.
Exactly. So, and I think both candidates didn't envisage how, for instance, the NNPC candidates, didn't think that, Peter Obi was going to pick this amount of momentum that he has picked up in the race. He assumed that it was a bit of a social media, euphoria, and it was going to die down any moment from now. I don't think he anticipated this kind of movement, right? And on the other side, I also think that he also underestimated the ability of Rabiu Kwankwaso to mobilize in the northwestern part of the country.
Yes.
I think that if they saw their strengths from the very beginning and they were willing to put down their egos, I think a merger would have been possible, and it would have been a formidable merger that would have pushed this election to, at the very least, the runoff.
Okay. All right, now let's quickly share with you, some of the, parties. The PDP has spoken about 11 of them that, supposedly would be merging with the PDP as the elections get closer. But these are some of the parties that will, of course, be going into election. There's the Accord Party, Action Alliance, Action Democratic Party, Action People's Party. A lot of them not very popular. The African Action Congress, the African Democratic Congress, ADC, All Progressive Congress, of course, which is the ruling party, and of course the Labour Party, which currently is one of the main forces, contesting for the elections. There are 18 of them in number. There's the National Rescue Movement, New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, the People's Democratic Party, which of course is one of Nigeria's most popular parties, People's Redemption Party, Social Democratic Party, Young Progressive Party, and the Zenith Labour Party. These are some of them that, of course, are moving into the elections in 2023. So, of course, PDP might be referring to some of all these extras that have been named. It's a very, very interesting election in 2023. And I'm gonna also ask Ayo Adio. Let's talk about. So, you must have heard in the conversations online and maybe even offline that to take a ruling party out in Nigeria, it takes a lot more than just social media and a lot more than just mouth. It takes a lot. People had said that the Labour Party and the PDP should have come together. Some alliances like that would have been better and given them a stronger chance. The egos obviously would not have let that happen. But do you Do you agree with that narrative that maybe if Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi had somehow been able to work together, the APC's chances would have been very, very low at this time?
I mean, I think that we're talking conjectures here and possibilities.
Yes.
If the PDP had some sort of a merger arrangement with the Labour Party, I have no doubt in my mind that they would give APC a run for their money.
Because they did in 2019. It was these same two people.
Exactly. And in fact, the dynamics are even different now, because it seems to me that Peter Obi's candidacy is exciting a lot of young voters across, particularly the southern part of the country, where traditionally voter apathy had held sway. Because if you looked at the voter turnout in elections, in previous election cycles, the Northwest particularly had an average of 45 to 49% voter turnout. In contrast, in the southern part of the country, voter turnout ranges between 18 and 27%. So with the excitement that the Peter Obi candidacy has generated, there's a likelihood that that voter turnout would at least increase to about 30%. And if it happens, it means that young people would actually be deciding significantly the outcome of these elections. And to your point, if Atiku could find a measure with Peter Obi, then it means that the elections will become more keenly contested than it is now. Even though the way it is now is not pretty straightforward for the APC. I always make the point that this election is a mirror of the 1979 elections, and the person that is going to win this election will be the person that is able to win his own battleground states and at least stay competitive in other states across the country.
Yes.
That's the formula to win, these current elections. I know that the APC have, 20 governors, 20 plus governors, across the states, which somehow tend to influence elections. They have members of the Senate and House of Assembly. They are the incumbent office in power. And so that gives them an advantage. They have a candidate who is, well connected across the country, who has a lot of goodwill to draw from, at least from the political class across the country. And so that gives them a tremendous, advantage. For the PDP on the other side, they are trying to tell the story, especially in the north, of how, the APC has been incompetent in handling insecurity and all of that. And perhaps that will help them sway voters, in the northern part of the country. However you look at it, it's still a very competitive election, and any formidable alliance is likely to sway the election in that party's favor. So for instance, if the PDP is able to go to an alliance with the Labour Party, it raises its chances significantly. If it can go into an alliance with the NNPP, it raises its chances significantly. If the APC goes into an alliance with the NNPP, it's almost business done.
I want to have a final question with you. In 30 seconds, can you explain why the northern part of the country seems to have that level of voter participation compared to the southern part of the country?
There's a gamut of factors, that play out here. One, it's because of the socio-political orientation of the North. It's easy to mobilize people to register to vote and to mobilize them to the polling units, as it is in the South. The South, particularly in the South, is a lot more Republican, which means people are more independent-minded, and it's more difficult to galvanize and mobilize people to register and mobilize them to vote. And I think that's what plays a major difference. It's easier to do that up north than it is, down south.
Ayadu, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's
for stopping by. Now, of course, as we count down to the elections, many of the candidates, how many do you know? I read out a list of some of the 18 political parties now, and I'm very certain that some of those names you're hearing for the first time. But let's take them one after the other. And of course, we're going to be starting today with just one. This morning, we are starting with the APGA candidate, the All Progressive Grand Alliance. They, of course, are mostly popular in the southeastern part of Nigeria. Their logo has a rooster standing tall right there on the logo. The presidential candidate is Professor Peter Umedi. He, of course, is pretty popular, among the in the southeastern part of Nigeria. He, of course, is a former chief judge of the Anambra State. He's also, of course, retired. Eventually got retired. He's the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Grand Alliance. And, of course, he's a professor of law at the University of Nigeria. He joined the party in Ward 2 in Aniocha area of Anambra following his retirement as chief judge of the state in March 2019. He had explained that his decision to join partisan politics was to keep his brain active, saying that those who retire and go to sleep end up having their brains fall asleep. The former chief judge has always canvassed that a Nigerian from the southeast be given the opportunity to be the next president. Actually, a very popular talking point for him. The Igbos have the highest investment in the country, and it is important for Nigerians to support them in their presidential bid in 2023 for the good of all. Now, while seeking the blessings of the party leaders, he stressed that only good leadership could bring a much-needed change in Nigeria. As a result, the former chief judge said he was prepared to give the country quality leadership and put her on the path of economic growth and economic expansion in every way possible. Yes, that is former chief judge of Anambra State, retired Justice Peter Umadi. He is the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Grand Alliance. Now, quick reminder to everyone to please go and get your PVCs. There has been an extension to the 29th of January for every Nigerian who has registered. Please get your PVCs. It should be currently at your wards. If they've moved away from local government areas, go to your wards and get your PVCs. Also, a quick reminder that you should please learn your party logos and candidates. Also, please do not sell your future. Remember, initially I had spoken about how much a vote really would cost in Nigeria, 10,000, 5,000, 20,000. Please do not sell your vote. It would never be enough to carry you for 4 years or 8 years, while, of course, your electoral decisions play out in 4 to 8 years. But that's it for Election Countdown Nigeria today, the very first edition. I'm going to go back to Olive Emodi to continue with Breakfast Central. Thank you once again, Mr. Ayo Adio, for stopping by.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Pleasure.